Welcome. I'm Brian Berletic. Joining me, as always, is Angelo Giuliano. We're going to be doing another update on Ukraine. This is going to be the primary focus of attention for quite some time. There's an ongoing military operation in Ukraine being carried out by Russia. We were told by Western analysts that the Russian army was going to starve like 2 Sundays ago. That obviously hasn't happened, and so there's a lot of adjustments going on. There's also a lot of danger. Angelo, we're 3 weeks in now. Where do you see all of this right now?
Well, I think that Russia hasn't put all its force into Ukraine. It's very marginal what is in Ukraine, and it's actually second grade when it comes to arms and army personnel. It's not the strongest force of Russia. So what they're doing is that they're being extremely careful when it comes to protecting civilian population. They could, if they wanted to avoid losses in their ranks, they would just do carpet bombing. I mean, the usual, what the West did to Yugoslavia, what the West did to Iraq. They would carpet bomb and just destroy completely the country and just come in. What they're doing here is to, how they can destroy Ukraine's army, but at the same time protect civilian population, because they really care about, they call them their cousins. So they really care about after, because they don't, if you destroy everything, then there's going to be a lot of resentment, and they need to prepare for the after war already now.
Absolutely. So there's this political objective afterwards that they have to always keep in mind. And this is why they're not going to do what America does. They see Ukraine as having historically been part of Russia. There were before 2014. There were so many things that were going on economically, historically, culturally, and so leveling Ukraine is not something that they're interested. Now, I was just listening before we started this. I was listening to a NATO, pro-NATO. Western analysts, and they were talking about how, Ukraine's forces, they're so smart, they're going into urban areas and they're avoiding fighting the Russian military out in the open. And I remember when this was happening all across the Middle East, how the West would call this cowardly and despicable and using human shields, using civilians as human shields. Now that the Ukrainians are doing it because they're backed by the US, by NATO, this is smart. And what they're forcing Russia to do to achieve this, to secure the country, to demilitarize it, denazify it, they have to go into these cities and they have to fight. Something else they said, and this analyst said that by next week, there was like a deadline that he made about how logistically Russia would be spent. It would be burned out and it would be kind of in a stalemate, but that's no longer the case because they've solved their logistical problems. Imagine that. Imagine Russia going in this initial operation and then adjusting over the weeks as things turn up. They see the problem and they solve it. Could you imagine that? And so that's what they've done. And so that deadline that is no longer on the table. They have fixed that. They have fixed their logistical issues. A lot of these issues were because there was some secrecy involved in the start of these operations. There were certain things that you just could not prepare because if you did, then the element of surprise would be gone. And now that they're doing this out in the open, they can adjust openly and they can do these things openly and they can resolve these problems. So this is what we're seeing. We're seeing Russia going through Ukraine slowly, methodically, but without any doubt, they are making gains on the ground. They are encircling major cities. They are inside major cities. Let me show this map here. Now, live map is pro-Western. It leans west. There's a lot of propaganda on there, but there's still certain things that you can sort of glean from it. Just to give you an example, this is Mariupol on the coast. And this city is completely surrounded by Russian forces, and yet they're still depicting it as if like they somehow didn't enclose the city. It is completely closed off, and it has been for a very long time now. And if you look at these icons, you can see that there are Russian forces in the middle of Mariupol. This is what's going on in Mariupol right now. The forces are inside, and they are fighting in the streets. and they are going to liquidate these mostly Nazis. They're Nazi military formations, Azov Battalion, Azov Regiment, whatever you want to call them. They were officially incorporated in Ukraine's armed forces for years and years and years. So when people say there are no Nazis or they're a small fringe group, that's not true. They are part of the official Ukrainian armed forces, and they are in Mariupol, and those are the forces that are being liquidated right now. They also admit, even though this is anti-Russian, pro-Western, they admit that there has been a huge number of civilians that were able to go out the humanitarian corridors. And that, Angela, you and I were talking about one of the I think it's a non-minister advisor to the president. His name escapes me, but he does daily updates on the fighting, and they're talking about humanitarian corridors. They're talking about how they're winning, but they're talking about all these humanitarian corridors that they're opening up. They don't say with Russia, but obviously with Russia. When you open up a humanitarian corridor, it's because you're going to lose that city, and you want the civilian population to get out. So that's not winning. That is a sign of losing. Now, there was something else very significant. I think it was, let's see, what day was that on? Was that on Sunday, Angelo? The missile strike, a significant Russian missile strike. I think
it was around that time. It was an extremely precise strike, and in terms of death, the figures vary. On the Ukrainian side, they are talking about 30 people died. On the Russian side, between 180 and 200. But it was extremely precise strike, and it was close to 30 miles from the Polish border. So this is the article, right? And and probably, I mean, this is a NATO base with mercenaries, but it's embarrassing. Whenever actually Russia is touching NATO assets within Ukraine, it's actually destroying the narrative that the NATO was not present in Ukraine. It is not true. NATO has been building facilities. They were even building a port, you know, by the sea. And so it's exposing that. And this is a big humiliation. This is precision strike. And we saw those videos of mercenaries. They said, well, you know what, we were fooled. This was a trap for us. They said that we were going to fight for you know, a bigger purpose, you know, like the wannabe Rambos, you know. I mean, this is what I call them. And they were actually running away. And they even had a promise just to leave Ukraine. You know, they said that they feared that they would be shot in the back. And you know, I'm quoting videos from those mercenaries. There's plenty of those videos that you can find on Twitter. So you see, this is a trap. I mean, whoever wants to go there as a mercenary, you know, they are the most despicable when it comes to Russian side. You know, they despise two types of people. They despise the Nazis, and they despise the mercenaries.
Yeah. So these were cruise missiles that I believe they were cruise missiles. They were fired from like halfway across Ukraine or even outside of Ukraine, and they hit this facility. Let me show you on the map. If you look at this map, I think I got some problem. I better close this. Looks like it's frozen. Angela, if I disappear here, just take over temporarily until this live map likes to let me see if there's a way for me to close this without.
Can you open other windows, or is it like frozen?
It's like everything on my browser is frozen. I think I have to go and come back. Angela, see if you could. I'll be back in like less than 5 minutes. See if you could. I want to talk about the conflicting stories. I want to talk about the significance of this facility that was struck. And I want to talk about how there were all kinds of Nazis crawling over it for years and years and years. This was not a secret. So I will be right back. Angelo, if you could please fill in for me for just a couple of minutes. Okay, thank you.
So if you, are you still there, Brian? I think Brian is gone. So let me cover for Brian. I mean, Brian is really the expert. And actually, let me take the time just to, if you can support Brian's work, you know, it's a lot of work. He's doing that with all his energy. It's been a decade. I used to follow Brian when he was writing under the name of Tony Catalucci. He's an expert, and you see, there are behind this Ukraine. There's hundreds of hours, so many hours of research, and it's very frustrating. You have people that coming into this topic, they just study like just for 1 week, you know, just a few hours. They watch documentaries and they are self-proclaimed experts, you know. Brian has been doing this for decades, so there's lots of work, and this was all planned. What you're seeing right now in Ukraine, it was all planned. Russia was ready 8 years ago. The sanctions started already 8 years ago. The war started already 8 years ago. People forget that Donbass has been bombed for the last 8 years. 14,000 people died. And it was an ethnic genocide. I mean, basically, the Ukrainian side, they said, well, you know, the Russians in Donbass, they are not human. We are going to bomb them. Oh, Brian, it's good you're back.
Okay,
I was
yes.
doing giving a background and actually saying, you know, promoting your channel and what you do. You know, it's just, you know, when we had this talk these days, you know, when you have those, I mean, morons, that's what I call them, you know, morons coming into this subject. They think they know and they don't know anything. And you've been covering this for the last decade, right?
Yes.
I mean, I got interested in this already in 2004. I mean, there's an orange color revolution, but I got really interested in this in 2014. And it's so important for people, just go back to that history. What happened? And exactly, I mean, who's behind this? I mean, besides the foreign funding, but this Nazi movement. And when I have those morons that come to me and they say, this is a conspiracy theory, I'm just going nuts. Do your homework, do your homework. This is extremely evil. It's starting from summer camps. They're putting those kids through summer camps, brainwashing and saying, well, you know what? Ukrainians, ethnically, we different. We better, and we need to clean up our country from, you know, they call kikes for Jews and Russians. That's what they call them. And they have, you know, it's openly heavy Nazi insignia, Nazi tattoos, and they're the worst type, you know, and they're worshiping, you know who? Bandera, you know, he was a Nazi collaborator. So it's so important that whenever we're covering this Ukraine, you know, we can do it on a day-to-day basis, but always go back to who are those guys? Who's behind this? And this is not Ukrainians. There is 80% of Ukrainians that are hostage of those movements. Yes. You know, Zelensky is a hostage. You know, the death threats. You know, he had, attempts on his life many times, but not from the Russian, from the same neo-Nazis. People, they forget, you know, actually, you were the same. You know, when Zelensky was elected in 2019, he was the hope for Ukraine. Even Russians, they were like, oh, finally, we have someone that is better than Poroshenko. And he really promised, he seems genuine. He promised peace, a peace agreement, you know, and he said, we are going to find a solution. And he comes in and he's even worse. And to my opinion, I don't know what I think your opinion is pretty similar, but he's a hostage. He's a hostage by neo-Nazis and hostage by his master.
He is, and I don't know how he was talked into even running in the first place, but it's obvious he's not making any decisions. He's going along with everything. The fact that he had zero qualifications for the job in the first place. He's a comedian. He's an actor. He had no business being in that office in the first place, and it's because the office is primarily it's a figurehead. The president is a figurehead. There are other forces at work. Ukraine's fate was hijacked in 2014. It ceased to be a sovereign country. You were talking right before I disappeared. You talked about NATO building facilities across Ukraine. Yes, that is true. And I want to get back into this. I got to add it first. Hold on a second.
Don't freeze again.
Yeah, I'm gonna be a lot more careful this time. This facility is part of a network in Lviv in Western Ukraine. It was part of a network of facilities, academies, training centers, where the US, other NATO countries, countries like Canada, they were coming in there and they were training mostly extremists. They were mostly extremists. And I want to show you this right here. This is congress.gov. This is not RT or something like that. And I think everyone will agree that there is Azov. Azov is a Nazi military formation. But people will claim, well, they're insignificant. Nobody was really supporting them. I'm going to show you where they are mentioned by name in this bill here, where it's a long bill, so let's give it a minute. So right down here, section 9015, Azov Battalion, the funds made available by this act may be used to provide arms, training, or other assistance to the Azov Battalion. This is a military formation within the Ukrainian armed forces that operates under the banner of Nazism. It isn't an organization renowned for having many Nazi members. It operates under a banner of Nazism. It is a Nazi formation incorporated into Ukraine's armed forces and funded, armed, and trained by the US government. It's right here on congress.gov. And by the way, the links to all of this will be in the video description. Seeing is believing. Look with your own eyes. This is a .gov US government website admitting this. This is CTV. This is news out of Canada. And they're talking about, this is from 2021, far-right extremists in Ukrainian military bragged about Canadian training, report says. And they're citing a report, this report actually, and I suggest people go through this. There's a lot of pictures, a lot of irrefutable evidence inside this. And this was from George Washington University. Again, this is Western media, Western governments, Western academic circles saying this, saying it since 2014, every single year from 2014 until now. They talk about the academy in Lviv and also this facility here. It was called, let's see, what was it called? It was a very Orwellian name. The International Peacekeeping and Security Center. Doesn't that sound nice? But it was actually a rallying point for all of these foreign mercenaries and extremists from around the globe coming to Ukraine to go fight Russians. They didn't even get to the battlefield. These missiles came in, they struck. Ukraine said none of the foreign volunteers died. They're going to say that because they want people to keep coming. They want people to keep coming. If foreign volunteers realize this is for real, this is not going to Afghanistan and fighting someone with no air force. This is someone who has an air force. Ukraine does not have an air force. They have no control over their own airspace. There are drones. Russia has drones. They have cruise missiles. They have aircraft. You are walking dead if you're going to Ukraine to go fight Russia. And when we started this, I was talking about this. I believe his name is Michael Kaufman. Michael Kaufman is this pro-NATO, pro-Ukrainian, Western war analyst. And he is talking about how Russia has worked out all of their logistics, how it's this methodical process of incrementally taking control of territory in Ukraine, and the fighting we see in the cities, the attacks in built-up areas. This is because he himself admits Ukrainian forces are deliberately hiding within built-up areas, within civilian infrastructure. So this is what's going on in Ukraine right now. This is the third week. We're 3 weeks into this. This is what's going on. So these foreign fighters liquidated before they even got to Kiev. The fighters are hiding amongst civilians, using civilians as human shields, just like the West always accused all of these groups in the Middle East of doing. And let's see. Russia claims that 180 foreign nationals died. I mean, the speed at which Ukraine claims that it was this number of people who died and none of them were foreign volunteers. How could they have done that so quickly? It's after a cruise missile strike. How are you identifying the bodies that quickly? It's just utterly absurd. So I highly doubt that. Now, the Western media, like the BBC, this was something else I wanted to point out. And Angelo, you were talking about videos from these foreign volunteers saying half their group was wiped out. So if half their group was wiped out, then it wasn't no foreign volunteers dying. And they were leaving and they were telling people don't go. So one side says one thing, the other side says the other thing. What is the truth is very hard to know. I also wanted to point out this NPR article. Angela, you and I have talked about this, and I've mentioned this before elsewhere. This is NPR going to Lviv in Western Ukraine, where these foreign fighters were coming. They were coming into the city, not this facility outside of the city. And what did they say? They said that, that Nazis. So this Canadian article was about the Nazis crawling all over this network of facilities in Western Ukraine in 2021. And this is NPR admitting that the people receiving these foreign fighters are also Azov Nazis. They're Nazis. They even say that they're Nazis right here, the word Nazi. So there is this kind of surreal double narrative going on where you're not allowed to talk about the Nazis. Russian President Vladimir Putin is just using that as an excuse. But then everywhere you look, there's this evidence of a huge number of Nazis inside of Ukraine's security apparatus. Every article you read about this from the Western media talk about how Ukraine's military was very weak in 2014, and they built it from the ground up using these extremists. So it's saturated with Nazis. There are entire formations operating under the banner of Nazism. So this was a serious issue on Russia's border, and it was an existential threat. And this is something that would, if it was the other way around, the U.S. would easily use this as an excuse to go invade another country. And now, because it's the other way around, the U.S. will not do it. Now, here's the thing, and Angelo, you and I were talking about, we talk about this very often. Where does it go from here? Is the threats that we hear from the West, is this hot air? Is this a bluff? Or is the U.S. willing to burn all of Europe to the ground to stop Russia in Ukraine? Angelo, what do you think? What are some of the ideas going on through your head? There's no way to be sure. Let's just lay that out. This is us speculating on the information available.
Well, let me speculate a little bit. And I would use the basic economics now. The US is in a very difficult position. You know, they want to maintain the US dollar hegemony. And there's a huge trade deficit and huge inflation. So I will take the parallel of World War II. World War II, what happened is that, they managed to burn Europe to the ground. And there was only one country that was untouched in the world, was the US. So while Europe was burning to the ground, the US actually was building weapons, selling so much. I mean, this is like was a huge boom, because Europe was destroyed, and so you had the US supplying arms to Europe against gold. I mean, this is when the US actually accumulated a huge amount of gold, and at the end, it came into the war. At the end, keep in mind that at the beginning was supporting more siding towards Hitler, for Hitler. But the reason was very simple. The biggest enemy were the communists. So it was not like massively investing into Hitler. But back in the old days, that the Madison Square Garden, they had, huge conventions, Nazi conventions. You had parades in Washington of Nazis, but you would never have communists parading no. And what happens is that towards the end, they supported one side, and then at the end, they supported the other side. Result, the US came in the largest superpower, and they wrote the rules of the game. Rule of the games economically. There was a Bretton Woods, there was the petrodollar, the imposed dollar on the world, and the whole system. They were like the only remaining, and it was a bit of counterbalance. It was a Warsaw Pact, the USSR. But you see where I'm going to is that here now, to who it benefits if there is a huge war in Europe? To who it benefits? This could be the reset that US is looking for. And they're using Europe. Who's the loser here? Just thinking just in terms of gas, only in terms of gas. If they don't buy Russian gas, who is going to sell gas at a much higher price? Only this actually could manage to help, like, working, the trade balance of the US. But who's going to lose? They're trying to rearm now Europe. And inflation. There's so many problems. You see. That's where I'm going to. I just want to go back to another thing. People, they need to be extremely careful. about this Nazi movement. And I will take a parallel of ISIS. Where did ISIS come from? You know, this was the CIA financing the Mujahideen. This is how they started, those radicals. And it became, over the last 30 years, it became a huge problem. It expanded. And this is the problem with Nazis, that this movement of neo-Nazis, because they start from kids, and because Ukraine has become the center of movement of neo-Nazi in the world. You know, they have conventions for neo-Nazis in Ukraine. That's the only place in the world. So what I'm very afraid of is, if this movement is not stopped now, they are going to have repercussion worldwide, because it's a new ideology and it's the new cool. You know what they're doing now is that, because I'm following this movement, I mean, I've been very close to them. I was even close to some of their members because I wanted to interview them. They are making movies on Netflix to whitewash those movements. So it's the new cool gangsters. You see, and this is when it becomes dangerous, is that you become a gangster or neo-Nazi, you make it look cool. So now you have like kids saying, well, you know what, it's not World War II, this is a new movement, it's cool, you know, and it's about, you know, nationalism, it's about being proud of who you are and so on. But that's extremely dangerous. And we don't realize, people don't realize that this actually will backfire. The same as ISIS, the Mujahideen we funded in the 70s, 80s to fight against USSR. This is going to backfire. And this is shame on EU, shame on the US. I feel so ashamed that we are actually backing this. And we're backing this, you know, against who? Against the same people that saved Europe from Nazism. 27 million Russians, they died for us, Europeans, for the world, to save us from Nazis. What are we doing now? 70 years later, we are funding the same movements against Russian. So imagine if you are Russian, they will die for their land, but they will die because they know that they had the experience of the Nazis 70 years ago. 27 million people died because of Nazis. It's not the Americans that died. You know how many people died during World War II? 100,000, untouched. The land of the US was untouched. The US was watching the world burning, and that's what they want to do again.
Yes, exactly. And this is a big fear, because look at what they do. Everyone keeps saying, you know, Ukraine is a sovereign country. They can pick. They could decide to be in the EU and in NATO. And the truth is, they didn't pick that. They had their government, their elected government, overthrown. And because the regime that was put into power is so unpopular, no one is willing to stand up and defend it. They build up this what started as a cadre of actual Nazis, the descendants of Nazi collaborators. These aren't neo-Nazis. This is a continuous line of people and organizations that stem from the actual collaborators in Ukraine with Nazis, doing the Holocaust, killing Jews, killing Poles, killing fellow Ukrainians. So it was that they were building up to protect this unpopular regime, and they continuously expanded it every single year. And Angela, you touched on something very important. We're talking about summer camps. You have a 16 or 17-year-old kid a couple of years ago. They're in the military now, and they are Nazi extremists. They are committed Nazis in Ukraine's military. They will go to the death for this ideology. This is exactly what Hitler did during World War II, the youth groups that they created. These were some of the most fanatical fighters at the end of the war. These were people who their entire universe was Nazism. And this is what they are doing again in Ukraine. And the US knows all about this, because you can say Nazis and ISIS, these are two different ideologies, but it's the same process. Brainwashing people, inducting them into this cult of ideas and symbols and mythology. They completely buy into it, and they will go to their death for it. And so it's the same process. We watched how damaging that was in the Middle East, and then we see them building this right in the middle of Europe, right on Russia's doorstep. Again, it was just such an obvious existential threat. It was not theoretical. It was not political. It was an army of Nazis, the US and the rest of NATO were building on Russia's doorstep. And it was something that had to be addressed. So now we're talking about Russia. They're in Ukraine. They're carrying out these operations. They are making methodical, systematic progress. They're working out all of these things that these experts said was going to, have them starving by 2 Sundays ago. That never happened. And so things as they are, Russia will accomplish its goals in Ukraine. At least militarily, they will accomplish their goals. They will demilitarize it. They will overthrow this government. Now, whether they could transform Ukraine into something that will not pose a direct threat to Russia in the near, intermediate, and long-term future, that's another question. But then we have to ask ourselves, what if NATO just sits out? Angela, you said something yesterday to me about, if NATO loses Ukraine, then it's game over. Who else is going to put themselves out on the line like Ukraine has for the West, for the United States, and for all of these Western countries? Think about Taiwan, which is not a country, is part of China, but they like to pretend that they're a country. And they are going through the same exact process. They have these youth groups that have radicalized people politically to think that they're not Chinese, to think that Taiwan should be an independent country, despite the fact that it completely goes against their best interests. They have U.S. troops in Taiwan right now training Taiwanese forces. And they're doing all of the same exact steps that the U.S. and NATO did in Ukraine leading up to this conflict. It's almost inevitable that they will provoke a conflict with China. China knows this. China knows this. China understands what Russia is doing in Ukraine. I have heard a lot of people who are living in fantasy worlds who think that China is benevolent. They are against the war. They're going to be the big peacemaker. They had no idea Russia was going to do this. Everyone knew this was going to happen since 2014. They realized that Ukraine was a problem that Russia would inevitably have to deal with. People in the Ukrainian government knew that this was going to happen, almost down to the letter. We were looking at a clip just yesterday about that. So China knows this. China knows that its fate is linked with Russia's. They know that the U.S. is trying to do the exact same thing to China through Taiwan that the U.S. did to Russia through Ukraine. And that is why they're supporting them. As a matter of fact, China has a very strict non-interference policy. And they kind of sidestepped that a little bit in not condemning Russia. And again, it's because there is something very real happening here that people are trying to ignore, but should not ignore. That once the U.S. is done with Russia, they're going to try to isolate China as much as possible, and they're going to do the same process to China. Everything that they're doing to Russia right now, all of the hatred, the racism, the violence, the seizing of property, the targeting of Russia's economy, this will be done to China 100, if not 1,000 times worse. And just think, people can be Russian and you don't know. They kind of blend in. I'm half Russian. Do people look at me and think I'm half Russian? They don't know. But Chinese, or just being Asian in general and being accidentally confused with someone who is Chinese, that is a real danger that people all across the West who live in the West, that is something that they face in the very near future, because I guarantee you already see them setting it up. You see them taking the steps. You see them poking at Taiwan right now and poking at China and talking about sanctions. If they don't get on board with us against Russia, we're going to start the sanctions on China. And they have their puppet in Kiev talking about cutting international trade lanes, like maritime lanes from Russia. And this is something that they talked about in the 2016 RAND paper about doing this same process to China. And neither China nor Russia have the naval power to, if there were straits very far from their territory that were blocked, and trade could not go to or from Russia or China, there's really nothing they could do at this point. They're working on changing that, but at this point, they cannot do anything about it. So this is the window that's closing for the U.S., and this is what they're rushing to achieve. Before that window closes completely, Russia and China are able to defend themselves across the full spectrum of options the U.S. has to stop, to encircle, contain, and subordinate them to this unipolar order that the U.S. has. So this is what's going on. This is what's really going on. Russia knows it. China knows it. And if you understand that every single thing China says makes 100% complete sense, and if not, then you have to ask yourself, why isn't China just outright condemning this? Because they've got this non-interference policy. Why aren't they just outright condemning it? Because China understands that they're next. This is about self-preservation. This is far past these ideals and principles that we all want to have. This is about survival. Angela, you have anything else
No,
to
absolutely.
add on?
I think it is extremely important for people to understand that both Russia and China are together on this. Actually, they've been working for the last 8 years together, just planning for this, China and Russia. What happens is that China doesn't want to appear to be full on board on this. It wants to appear diplomatically neutral. But people, they need to differentiate two things: the words and actions. I don't care about the words. Words, it's like postures. Postures, it's like it's a beauty contest of politicians. When it comes to Russia and China, just look at action. People need to focus on that. Actions. Belt and Road Initiative, what is it about? Those cooperation in Eurasia, what is it about? Increasing of trade. When you have trade, it's money. Money becomes power, and it is long-term relationship. When you have President Xi visiting, that is going to meet with the Saudi Arabia king, and they're talking about using renminbi instead of US dollar. This is very powerful. It's far beyond all the talks about, oh, I sanction you, this and that. When you have India that is not sanctioning Russia, this is the major news. People should just focus on that and realize the world is completely changing. What was unthinkable yesterday, it's a reality today. Going from unipolar world to multipolar world. So what happened, just going back to Ukraine now, what happens is that we have Western media saying, well, Ukraine is actually, they're brave. They're actually, the Zelensky is telling the Russians, well, you can leave now. Otherwise we are going to destroy you. And this is when you need to be extremely careful. They want to portray that Ukraine is winning and that Russia is desperate. And maybe this is the time that there might be like false flag operation, meaning, well, maybe a gas explosion or, massive killing of civilians. So they can frame the Western world to say, well, you know what, Russia is so bad, we need to intervene. And this is the biggest risk. And they need to do that. Why? Just going back to Taiwan. If Taiwanese DPP, this puppet government in Taiwan, they see that the Zelensky, the neo-Nazis, has been used and discarded and NATO didn't intervene, do you think they are going to do the same mistake? They might be a bit cold feet. And this is why, it's essential. Ukraine, the world is changing these days. It is changing. And you can see the votes, everything that is happening, this global order, you just see who's voting for the US, who's backing the US. It's just the Western powers. It's all those colonial powers. You can see on the map, the global South, Asia is for Russia, but they just don't want to call it out loud.
Yeah, it's complicated. It's because a lot of people say the U.S. is done, it's gone. It's still an incredible threat. It has a lot of power. It has a lot that it can do to ruin countries still economically, politically. There are countries that, okay, China is their largest trade partner, but then usually their second largest trade partner is the United States, and it is a significant amount of their economy in terms of exports. So there are a lot of reasons why they may support Russia but not come out outright and say it. Other countries are just coming outright and saying it. What I worry about is that NATO will eventually get involved in Ukraine. Ukrainians seem very confident that this will eventually happen. When you hear the United States say, oh, we're never going to do a no-fly zone, that just raises suspicions to me, because I would always feel that they would lie about it and say that they would, just to try to rattle Russia's cage. But they're saying they're not going to do it, almost as if they're going to do it, or they're going to try to do it. And I think people say, hey, Russia has all of these nuclear weapons. They wouldn't dare. But you have to ask yourself, would Russia cross that line and use nuclear weapons? This is so dangerous, because we don't know if they would or not, but maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they would only use nuclear weapons if Russian territory itself was under threat. And maybe NATO will make that calculation and they will decide to get involved. So, I think the U.S. has something like 100,000 troops in Europe right now. So it could get extremely messy. And just like you said, Angela, if Ukraine is gone, NATO loses Ukraine, and this puppet that, gets taken down, who else is going to want to make that commitment to the West? Will Taiwan want to keep playing this game, knowing that almost certainly that is what's going to happen? I mean, there's no doubt. The U.S. does not care about any of these people. None of these people are special. None of these people mean anything. They're just a stepping stone for the U.S. to get what they want. They've done this to so many countries throughout history. It's amazing that anyone still falls for it, but they do. And so how far is the U.S. and NATO willing to go to keep this whole thing going? I don't know. It's so dangerous. We're in such dangerous waters right now. And if not, all things being the way they are right now on the ground, Russia will eventually succeed in what they're doing. So we have to be very careful. That's the one thing that I'm worried about. In the very beginning of the operation, and before you get all of the information, you're really not sure which way it'll go. Now, the only real factor, I think, is NATO getting involved. And we keep hearing them, when they struck that facility in Western Ukraine, we kept hearing that, even if it's an accident, they will go to war with Russia. If there's even an accident, like one shell lands in NATO territory, they will go to war with Russia. So that is a very reckless thing to say, because accidents do happen. And so they're saying they will go to war even if it was an accident. They will risk all of the fallout that will unfold from a war between NATO and Russia, even if it's just an accident. It's such a reckless thing to say. But we have to remember, there are things happening now that a month or two ago people said would never happen. Europe is too dependent on Russian gas. They will never go along with this. They completely have. They've gone along with it in ways we couldn't even imagine they would. The complete obliteration of Russian media from across the Western world, and not just Russian media, but even people like me, who I'm basically a nobody. I'm not Russian media, and they're deleting me. And people like me are being deleted off of US-based social media. That was actually something else I wanted to talk about. But Angelo, do you have anything else you want to add about NATO getting involved in Ukraine?
Maybe just about the sanctions. Just look at all the emotional, irrational, the sanctions, even sanctioning dogs, cats, sportsmen and so on. The thing is that you become emotional when you are losing. That's a reaction of someone that is losing. It's very important. Now you see throughout, all the sanctions after all this, Russia didn't cut the gas to Europe, didn't cut oil. It's going to keep on supplying. It's actually supplying. In terms of US dollar value, it's much higher because the price increased. So you see what happens, that Russia was like, what, we got our plan. Somehow this war is going to end up. And if I throw all my weapons, I don't have any more weapons. You see, they threw all the sanctions. Like EU and Russia and the US don't have any more sanctions. What else can you do? And you know what? If Russia was to cut the gas to Europe, it would damage so much the economy. It would just collapse completely. If you don't have the fuel for your economy, you cannot do anything. You can have the markets, but you don't have the capacity even to produce, to put electricity. So you see, and important to see, it's been 8 years that Russia has built up a solid economy. It had accumulated $600 billion of reserve currencies. It's a self-sufficient. You could close Russia overnight. It can be like North Korea, self-sufficient completely. Everything is there. They don't need the world. So now what is happening is that you accelerating the shift of Russia towards Eurasia. And to who it's going to be benefit to China, and who's going to be the biggest loser is EU. EU is completely hijacked by US interests, and you see it makes it so obvious. They followed all the way. They are going to buy gas more expensive from the US, they are going to buy weapons from the US. And what is it for EU? You're just being used, completely used.
Yeah, and it's completely against their own best interests. And it's shocking how much control that they have. And it's shocking how much control the US has. And this is why I say people have to be very, very careful. You got to be very careful about writing the US off as defeated, because they're still incredibly dangerous. It's a superpower. It still has the largest economy by certain metrics. It still has the largest, most experienced military. All they have done over all of these decades is mass slaughter people all around the globe in every climate and place. This is what they have been doing. So this is an extremely dangerous nation. It's a dangerous government. It's a dangerous circle of special interests in Washington and on Wall Street, and people should never underestimate something like this. They should never do that. That is a big mistake. But what did President Xi Jinping say about the Chinese economy? It's not a pond. It is an ocean. It is an ocean unto itself. And they can do whatever they want within their own economy. Their population is bigger than the G7 combined. So if Russia has access to that, and this is what the US is right now trying to threaten or beg, or threaten and beg at the same time, China, please enforce these sanctions that we're definitely going to do to you next. Please do this to Russia. If Russia has access to the Chinese economy, it's going to be a win-win for Russia and China. And like you said, Angela, they've been preparing for this since 2014. In 2014, most people realized that Russia was going to have to do something about Ukraine. I personally thought that at that time, they would do what they're doing right now. They would have gone in and they would have taken all of these key places, and because that government was not Ukraine's government anymore. That was a client regime installed by the US. It was so obvious where this was all going to go. And everybody knew it. So there's that. I want to talk about this information warfare, the propaganda and the censorship. I want to, because RT has just been completely wiped off the Western world. I'm going to show you this real quick. This is RT live on Odyssey, and the link to this will be in the video description below, and I'm going to stop it before my computer crashes again. But check out the video description below. RT's Odyssey account is there, so you can watch their videos. You can also watch the live stream, and you can check out their Telegram. And it's not because I want to promote Russian media, but I do think that RT is an important source for people to include into their stream of incoming information. I watch Western media, I watch Russian media, I watch Chinese media, I watch media from around the world, and I make my own decision. I do my own research, and I encourage everyone to do that. RT being completely deleted like they were, that is wrong. And this is the mask falling off of the West. What are they fighting for in Ukraine if they're going to do this? They're going to delete, censor, control the information space like this. So there's no more free speech. People are not allowed to express any opposition to what the West is saying in regards to Ukraine and Russia. So there's no more free speech. You cannot have civilized, intelligent discourse in the West anymore. It has been made impossible. You will be deleted off of social media. There was someone else that got deleted the same week as me, Mango Press, I think, and there was this
Mango
other
Press,
one.
yes.
There was
The
this other one.
ASB military
Yes.
was actually cancelled. But you know, now there's a witch hunt. You know, it's like McCarthyism. Remember McCarthyism in the US? They were going after all those artists that were actually pro-communist. You know, I mean, they eradicated communists back then. You know, if you're a communist, you are going to jail. So now what they're doing in the US, it's like there's this cancel culture where they're going against, you know, Tucker Carlson, Tulsi Gabbard. You know, and what are they doing? They're not pro-Russian, but they're telling their people, well, those are foreign agents. We should actually, and you know, if there is treason, I mean, there's a death penalty for treason in the US. There's a death penalty. So you are telling an ex-congresswoman, Tulsi Gabbard, that she's a foreign agent, and you are telling Tucker Carlson is the most popular anchor man in the US. And they're going after them. You see, and when you see that, and you're an average American, what do you do? I mean, you don't say anything. when you're being threatened like this.
Yeah, I do want to point something out about Tucker Carlson and MSNBC. These are like two actors on a stage, and they're putting on a play, and they're completely on this. They're going off the same script, even though they seem adversarial on the stage. And their job is to make sure that, because U.S. politics is very cleanly cleaved left and right, and MSNBC will tell you lies and, oh, Tucker Carlson and Fox and Trump bad, and then Tucker Carlson will say MSNBC bad. And what you'll notice is that they will make sure that no matter which side you fall on and wherever you are along the spectrum, you are paying into at least one major part of the U.S. foreign policy objectives, either hating Russia full on or China or both. They've convinced some people to hate absolutely both. And this is the political discourse. You have to be very careful. If you're on TV in the United States, they want you on TV. If they don't want you, you won't even have a Twitter account. I guarantee you that. I want to show you.
I like that. I mean, this is really important for people to understand. This is divide and control. And this is what they're applying to the US. The more the society is divided, the more it gives you an illusion of democracy, of free choice. But at the end of the day, those politicians don't follow people that elected them. They follow the donors. I mean, really, people, they need to understand this is an illusion of free choice. At the end of the day, whoever pays them, they will obey to those people, but not the voters. So you see, and I want to point out also one more thing. We are not anti-US, anti-EU. We're not. We love our country. This is actually, why are we doing this? It's because we love our countries. But we are seeing that taxpayers, where is their money is going to? It's a wealth transfer. Remember, we talked about this. It's a wealth transfer. When you have those wars, it's a wealth transfer from taxpayers to military industrial complex and to the elites. And you see the stock markets, when you had the Ukraine crisis, Raytheon, all those stocks went up, and this is a wealth transfer. What is happening? There's no universal healthcare. And then Ukraine needs 1 billion, give you 1 billion. We could focus on all economy, all people, and then we can work with Russia, with China for prosperity, global, good, the common good. This is what Chinese has been talking about for a long time, is a common good. It's no more, those times of imperialism where you contain the poor. You're not going to be industrialized. We're not going to give you education. We are going to choose your government, keep you poor. No, and we are going to just control you. But you are 80-90% of the population. But it's fine. It's fine. And then we are going to make some movies, and we're going to sell you some movies and sell you or culture. It's just disgusting. And it's always this sense of superiority. We are the best. I mean, all democracy. I mean, by definition, democracy has become Western. Now there are many types of democracy. And we want to sell something that is not delivering to all people. People are starving. You go into the street. Why in the West people are sleeping in the street? No coverage. They are modern slave. Why do you want to export this model? Why would you want to do that? So why I think we're doing this, you and I, it's because we love our country, but we don't like the direction it's taking. They're taking, it's a suicide, and it's war. It's very counterintuitive. People, they think that they go in the streets with Ukraine flag, they are anti-war. It's not. You're doing the game of NATO. Game of NATO. If you want to be anti-war, you just go with 2 flags and go with flags anti-NATO. Stop this absurdity.
Yeah, I mean, this whole conflict in Ukraine right now, again, it was not Russia doing this 3 weeks ago. This was a war that had been going on for 8 years, and it was a war that was triggered by the U.S. overthrowing the Ukrainian government, installing a client regime, and building an army of Nazis on Ukraine's are on Russia's border, within Ukraine's border, and killing Ukrainians the whole time for 8 years straight. And Russia is going into the middle of an ongoing war, not start a war. So if you're anti-war, you want the war to stop. Ask yourself, what is a more realistic way of getting this to stop? Leaving it up to NATO, who has committed the worst crimes of the 21st century, or allowing Russia to finally, they tried everything else. They were at the negotiation table for 8 years. They had a list of very reasonable demands that were made, and they were all rejected because this is what the US has been doing for decades. This was their whole plan: encircle and contain Russia, encircle and contain China. 1 and 2, this is all they talk about. I remember someone saying, oh, there's thousands of think tank papers. Oh, that doesn't mean anything. Yeah, if you actually read all of them like I have, you will notice that they're all exactly the same. From top to bottom is the exact same routine. Encircle, contain Russia, encircle, contain China. They just have different ideas of how to do it, but it is the same plan. And oftentimes it is the same plan, and it is the same, way of doing it. And then there's just very small details. That's how policy, Angela, you're talking about democracy in the US. You want to know how decision-making is actually done in the US? I've probably said this many times before. I'm going to say it again. You have these corporations who fund these think tanks. There's many think tanks, but if you look at who funds them, it's all the exact same corporations. It's all the exact same corporations. It's sometimes literally the exact same board of directors coming in and sitting on the board of directors of these think tanks. And they are funded to come up with these policy papers that reflect the interests of their sponsors, these corporations. Then they get a lawyer to draft it into a bill, and they give it to a lobbyist to send it to Washington, where it gets rubber stamped, most of the time not even being read by these elected representatives who are just signing off on it. And they'll even admit, I didn't read that. It's 1,000 pages. Who's going to read that? Yeah, the think tank, the lawyers, and the lobbyists, they read it. And if you read, there's an article, I forget which, it's Western media though. They say, how do they know what's in the bill if they didn't read it? Oh, well, they have think tank advisors that come and explain it to them. Yeah, so that's how your policy is getting made. It's not being made by elected representatives listening to the people, just like you said, Angelo. They are responding to who has all the money, and that's Wall Street, that's Washington, London, Brussels. That's how it goes. Now, I wanted to show people Gab is like a Twitter alternative. It really isn't all that great, but it's better than nothing. This is where ASB News went, and they got 37,000 followers. That's not too bad, but I think they had something like 200,000 followers on Twitter. Yes. And they were showing, a lot of what you were not going to see. They were punching holes in this myth that Ukraine was somehow stopping the Russian army, and that the Russian army starved two weeks ago. They were punching holes in that, and so that's why they're gone. It's not because they did anything wrong. This is the West controlling their information space, which you should expect them to do now. The real problem that I have is here in Thailand, for example. Russia and Thailand are very close allies, and they have been throughout history, all the way back to the time of the Tsars. So to see the information space in Thailand flooded with anti-Russian propaganda, trying to stir up hatred against Russians, telling people to go to the Russian embassy and protest. To see that is artificial. And why is that? That is because the information space in Thailand is utterly controlled by US-based social media companies. Companies like Google through YouTube, and also the Google search engine, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And when they decide that there's a point of view that will be expressed inside of Thailand's internal information space, and even regarding Thailand's internal political affairs, that is what's going to happen. That point of view is going to be promoted. And when they decide this point of view is going to be silenced, they make that decision. The Thai government has no say in it, and the people of Thailand have no say in it. So this is a whole domain in Thailand that is out of the control of the actual Thai people and the Thai government. It would be like not controlling your airspace, or not controlling your shores, or having the US manage who can come in and go out of your country at your land borders. And this is the 21st century. Your information space is a domain that needs to be defended. And I've said it a million times, and I'm going to keep saying it until someone does it. you need to you'll import Russian helicopters. Thailand has Russian helicopters that they've imported. They have Chinese main battle tanks. They have Chinese naval vessels. You will import this to protect your physical domains. Why not import platforms from Russian IT companies and Chinese IT companies? Import those platforms and set up your own platforms to establish control over your own information space. And then the next crisis that comes along, you're not going to have the United States exerting pressure on your population, who in turn will put pressure on the government because they got the wrong information. They're not going to pressure you to do something that is not in your nation's best interest, like ruining your ties with Russia, a country that you've been allies with since before there was a United States. You have anything you want to add on to that, Angelo?
That is perfect. I just want to add up. I mean, modern warfare is in the mind. It's no more. This is where Russia at the moment is weak, but it's weak for the reason you mentioned before. The information space is managed by the West, and they manage the narrative. You manage the narrative, you manage everything. And this is why we're here doing those live shows. It's to bring some awareness. At the end of the day, people, they have their own opinion. I do respect that. What I have a problem respecting is ignorance. I mean, really, it's just, when people, they don't do the homework. We need to do the homework really to understand stuff. It takes time, of course, but we need to understand, that there is a narrative, and it's especially in wartime, it's about how they can control our minds, really. So I'm just saying, people just question, keep objective mind, because and things are never black and white. Once you start thinking white and black, well, you are pawn, and you are warmonger. This is warmonger attitude. It's a gray world. And at the end of the day, you know what? It's not Americans against Russians and so on. It's the elites that are behind this. Don't think you are American fighting Russia. No. You are American, victim of the elites, and you are going to follow what the elites tell you what to think and what to do. At the end of the day, you are a slave. They already make you a slave in your daily life. But then when they're going to do those wars, because they want to control you better, it's going to be worse, in wartime. And they want to get richer. So it's not about me being American and them being Russian. No, you know what? You are a slave. What is your free choice? You don't have free choice. So when you are actually supporting those wars, you're a slave, modern slave. It doesn't change.
And I was watching Western media because I was looking where I could find RT and to really make sure that they actually did really just completely delete it off of YouTube. And even on the Western media, they say people are all saying, when they do a poll, everyone wants a no-fly zone over Ukraine because everyone's just been whipped up in this area. They have no idea what's going on in Ukraine. Yeah. But then when someone says, but if you do a no-fly zone over Ukraine, then that means you have to shoot down Russian warplanes. And then the support for it dropped. And this is the problem. The Western media is not informing you. They're misinforming you. They're misleading you. They're leading you off of a cliff. And this is what they did to Ukraine as a country. And this is what they're doing to the Western public. You see these people with these Ukrainian flags. Before this, they didn't even know where Ukraine was on a map. And they had no idea there was a war going on for 8 years. And when you talk to them, you realize how they know nothing at all. When you talk about Nazis, they just recite whatever they heard on MSNBC. When you start getting into the details, they start to lose it. Hold on. There's one more thing I want to really make sure I get done. So people are asking where they can find me. Let me just do this real quick. So I showed you on Odyssey, you can find RT, including their live stream. I am also on Odyssey. It's odyssey.com/Land Destroyer, because that's what New Atlas was before it was New Atlas. But if you go to Land Destroyer, you will see the New Atlas logo. This is in the video description below. This automatically uploads all of the videos from YouTube here. And so if I ever disappear off of YouTube, please go to Odyssey. I'm also backed up on Rumble. I just did this recently. There's only a couple of videos that made it over automatically. I got to figure out how to fix that. I also have had a website, newatlas.report, and as you can see, it is gone. It is gone because the sanctions prevented me from renewing it. I couldn't. There were no payment options to renew it. So now newatlas.report is gone. But in the video description below, you will find a link to my old blog. And as you can see, I'm already updating it. And this is a video that hasn't even come out on YouTube yet. So if you go over to landdestroyer.blogspot.com, you can find all of this. I don't know how long this is going to be around for, but I am working on a new website. The reason I hosted it in Russia is because I don't want them shutting it down like they did to presstv.com. You know, that is a thing that the US does. They're just full outright do whatever they feel like. Might makes right. And so sometimes coming up with a logical argument is not enough. You need to actually start making yourself, your community, your nation stronger to stand up, because the US doesn't care about what's right or wrong. They just do what they feel like doing. If they can, they will do it. And if they can't, it's because you stop them from doing it. And this is why Russia is in Ukraine right now, because they did everything for decades and decades to try to avoid this. And the US would not listen to a logical, rational argument. But now they are being forced to listen to Russian military power in Ukraine. Let's see what else. I am on VK. Just type in Brian Berletic and VK. I think the link will be in the video description. If not, I will add it in afterwards.
You're in Telegram too, Brian? You're on Telegram too?
Yes, I'm on Telegram. That is in the video description below also. Please follow me on Telegram. That is what I'm actually updating most often. YouTube and Telegram, and now my blog. That's what I'll be updating every day, a couple of times a day, if you want to follow along. And I suggest people go to Telegram, even though Telegram is being forced to censor RT in certain countries. So if you're in one of these countries where the local laws is forcing Telegram to delete RT, I don't know what to tell you. But there might be other accounts that you can follow that are not being censored that will show you the most relevant RT stories. So we got to really adapt, and we got to be on our toes. We're at an unprecedented point. It is extremely dangerous. It's going to require us to adapt with the situation. It is not one of these things that's going to blow over. This is not going to blow over. They're doing this to Russia because they plan on doing it to China next. It's not going to blow over. You could stick your head in the sand. All that means is when the steamroller comes, you're not going to see it coming. That's all that means. This is definitely coming, though. We're trying to warn people. The more people that are awake and pushing back and paying into these alternatives, the better chance that we have of getting through this. Angela, do you have anything else you want to add on? Are we missing anything? If someone asked, if you got any questions, maybe ask in the comment section.
Let's see, maybe just if you say question, interesting question. I just want to add, I like this quote from Mark Twain. He said, back in the old days, he said, when you read, if you don't read the newspaper, you are uninformed. If you read the newspaper, you are misinformed. And this is what we're going through, especially right now. It's massive disinformation, and we're not even at war. I mean, officially, we are not at war with Russia. And look at what they did. Imagine the day that they are at war, we will have to actually shut down, you and myself. We have big risk. Once we'll be at war, open war. And there's no, the day, if one day they are at war, I will be back to be Italian, Swiss, and I have to stick for my country, and I'll be a victim. But I will have to shut down. I mean, I don't see myself being online if we are in open war. We need to protect ourselves and our families.
Yeah, it's already borderline. If you're not going along with all of this nonsense the West is talking about Ukraine, they're basically saying you're a traitor, you're a criminal, you should be in jail, everything you have should be seized and shut down. They're already talking like this. So Angelo and myself, we're taking a risk doing this. Angelo, you more so because you're actually in the West right now. But I'm not that much safer. I mean, Thailand is one of these countries that is always doing this balancing act. And if it came between maintaining that balance and just giving up some random guy on YouTube, they would definitely do that. we have to start thinking about what we're going to be doing. This is extremely stressful. There's nothing fun about this. For the longest time, I was anonymous. I didn't want anyone to know who I was. I just wanted to write my articles, and that's it. And by necessity, we've had to come out and do this. Angelo, you have your own business, and you had to come out because they were burning Hong Kong down around you and your family. You had to speak up about it. And it's the same thing here in Thailand.
I've seen this. I was in 2009, 2010 in Thailand, in Bangkok. When they were burning the center of Bangkok. This big shopping mall. I have first-hand experience. I get those comments from those armchairs. People staying in armchairs. I've experienced in 2000. I was in a coup in Ecuador. I was in Venezuela in '99. I saw like Chavez and the whole attempt of a color revolution there. In Hong Kong the same. And once it gets this, they're trying to burn your home. People realize, well, this is no more Hollywood. This is real. And I just came back from Venezuela. I spent 2 months there. Venezuela is at war. They attempt, they try to invade the beach, and to make a mass invasion there. But you know what? I have my friends there. I know them for 20 years. And they used to travel around the world. They had the money to travel around the world. Well, you know what? When I was there, I was the one filling up the fridge. They were waiting for 12 hours to put in gasoline. This is war, and this is real. It's not, if people, I'm not doing this just like watching and be passive. It touches me because I've seen that. And when you travel in the global south, remember one thing, that, your well-being, the West, it's because you oppress those people, And so if you are really for lives and human rights, well, just be equal. Just be equal. We are all equal. It's not because Ukrainians have blonde hair and blue eyes that their life is worth more. How about 1 million people in Iraq that died? And this is the whole hypocrisy of the West, and the worst are those fake leftists, pro-peace, supposedly pro-peace. It's all BS. Excuse my French, but it's all BS. If you're anti-war, you should be anti-imperialist. You should really align with those values. Those human rights. And just check. It's all fake. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, it's all fake.
Yes. We got a question about Iran striking a U.S. facility in Erbil in northern Iraq. So, I mean, this is getting really serious. Iran has been doing this too. Their red lines are all being crossed, and they're hitting back. And you have to think about what's going on. You have the U.S. and Israel just attacking whatever they feel like in Syria, and Syria and Iran and Russia, and they're all expected to just sit there and take it. And we're starting to see that they're not doing that anymore. If you saw the footage of those missile strikes, I mean, that was a powerful demonstration of what Iran can do if they really wanted to, and they have been deliberately kind of pulling their punches. What everyone is trying to do is, and Angela, what you said is so important. If you are a Westerner and you live in the West, or you were in the West and you traveled to China and you're in this like very well-developed, safe environment, it's very easy to say, oh, I'm anti-war, blah, 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 blah. Go to a country that is affected by this. Look at people who are suffering because of the economic fallout. Look at people who are struggling year to year to year to make ends meet. Look at people who have watched their neighborhoods be burned or terrorized. Look at people who have ended up in the hospital. If you had a friend or something that ended up in the hospital because they caught shrapnel because of these US-backed terrorists. This is what has happened to me here in Thailand. I've witnessed this. I've heard the explosions and the gunfire down the street during some of these episodes. I've known people that have been directly affected. I've known people who were targeted and followed around and had to leave the country for their security. I've witnessed all of this. It's extremely personal. And I'm not going to sit there and apologize for supporting Russia for defending itself against this global campaign of war and terror that the West has been waging for decades, as part of a much wider generational Western imperialism that the entire planet has been subjected to generation after generation. I'm not going to ever apologize for that. And if YouTube wants to delete my channel, so be it. I'm not going to couch my position, because this was never about, making money or being famous. I don't care about any of that. People look at me. I'm wear the same shirt almost every single day. That's like 3 days now I've worn this shirt. I don't care about impressing people. I'm just doing what I think whatever is in my power to get this information out to people. One thing I want to say, because we're kind of over time, Angelo, I really appreciate your help and the people around you that have helped me from the first day that I started making videos. People might not know that, but you actually helped me get started making videos. And to everyone who follows my work and supports me in every single way, I really appreciate that. Not just month to month or through donations, but also sharing my work with others, people sending kind comments, news tips, or just being there. I mean, it's a group effort. We're all in this together, and maybe for some people it hasn't impacted them yet, but it might very soon. And so try to learn from people who have been through it, and try to prepare yourself as best as possible, so you don't have to go through that by yourself like we did. Angela, I don't know, like when in Hong Kong, there were certain instances where you were kind of by yourself. You kind of, because everyone around you is, they're from there, and you're a foreigner, and you stick out like a sore thumb, and it's quite a risk to do that. And until you've been in that situation, it's very hard to describe how surreal it is.
It is danger
that you put yourself and your family.
It is scary. It is scary. They posted the picture of my son. 3 years old. He was 3 years old back then, on social media, saying, "Well, this is the son of Angelo." I mean, imagine your son. They were so nasty. And for 1 year, we with my partner, we wouldn't go in the street and speak Mandarin. We started speaking English. We speak Mandarin together naturally, but then we would speak English. And actually, I was restricted to where I was going. There was only 3-4 places I would go, in downtown, like the white collar area. And I had to put a cap, sunglasses on, because I was targeted, I mean, people were after me, and they were extremely nasty. And lucky me, to be honest, because I'm white, they wouldn't target white people. But I confronted them, and I saw so nasty stuff, when, it's no movies there. When we are talking about CIA agent in the street coaching writers, that's a reality. And you know what they want? They want chaos. And I saw the whole, it's so interesting when you see Ukraine on Fire by Oliver Stone. Well, the playbook was exactly the same in Hong Kong. And, they put a bomb 500 meters from my home. I mean, not targeting me, but, there were terrorists. That was terrorists, nothing else. And at some point, when they start destroying your home, you go out. And once you start into this movement of speaking out, well, you want to share your own history. Because it's reality. It's not, people, they think it's a movie, it's Netflix. It's like, it makes me think like those mercenaries. They went all the way to Ukraine. Like if you look at the profile of those guys, they're losers. They don't have, they have there's an ego problem, and they think they're fighting for a greater good. And they go there and they realize that the reality is different. You are going to die, and that people, they don't have the contact with reality. They see war through movies. So average Americans, why are they for war in Europe? Because it's in Europe. I tell you, the day that you are attacked on your ground, you will defend yourself. So why do you think that 70% of Russians are backing Putin? Because they know they are next. The next war is going to happen in Russia. And they are resilient. They had World War II, but they had the 90s. When the USSR, disintegrated. You know how much they suffered? They suffered so much. So they are so resilient. So if you think that those small sanctions are going to do anything to the Russians, well, dream on. They are much more resilient than those lateral liberals in the West that they see that the reality only through CNN.
Yeah, and don't forget the two Chechen wars, which were sponsored by the U.S., backed by the U.S., perpetuated by the U.S. inside of Russia's borders, and that was after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that was a horrible two conflicts, tens of thousands of people dead inside of Russia, and the Russian leadership understands that NATO and the U.S. did not destroy all of these countries from North Africa to Central Asia and overthrow governments all along Russia's border to just stop there. They have openly said that the next step is incorporating, absorbing Russia, and redoing to Russia what was done in the 90s. And again, I know people who lived through that, who left Russia because of that. They fled because it was so horrible. The one guy's dad got machine gunned in the subway. Could you imagine that? I mean, again, until you experience it, it's hard to explain. To see these scenes in person where you're familiar with, streets that you walk down every day, when you see this kind of violence visited upon places you're familiar with, it changes your tune. You suddenly get a good grip on it. And like I said, I was in the military. I already was sickened by what I saw the U.S. military doing to people in Japan who are supposed to be America's allies, and that made me sick enough. And then when I went to Thailand to just kind of get away from all of it, and then when you see it being done to these people, they don't want anything to do with this. They've done nothing. They're not a threat, and they're having their country ruined and threatened. It's hard to not take it personally, but
can I add one thing? Sure. One thing, Brian. I think maybe a bit of promotion of people that are doing some really good job out there. I mean, my personal favorite. I mean, we have Patrick Lancaster. Patrick Lancaster is in Donbass. I mean, he's taking so much risk. He has his family there. His wife and kids are left for Russia right now. But he's seeing corpses. He's seeing corpses, and you should just follow. I mean, follow his channel. See, this guy is putting his life at risk, you know, and he's not one of those fake reporters, anchors men that are sitting in an armchair. He's risking his life. So there's Patrick Lancaster. I personally like the Duran. There's Gonzalo Lira. Then there's a Gray Zone. I think, you know, I mean, we're not alone. There's many people out there, you know. It's just and I think we're learning from each other. Do you have any channels that you would recommend, Brian?
Actually, I'll tell you what, people, if you're not following me on Telegram, follow me on Telegram. If you don't have a Telegram account, please get a Telegram account, because anyone worth following is not going to be on Twitter or Facebook. There are people, again, like I said, I know people in Thailand who have huge audiences, and they're being deleted off of Facebook in Thailand for giving a Thai perspective to this that the U.S. doesn't like. So they have deleted Thai people in Thailand's information space. They cannot talk to other Thai people now because there's no other alternative. So please get on Telegram. It's not perfect because, like I said, there's local laws across the West that enable them to block, say, RT on Telegram in those countries. But say here in Thailand, I have access to everything on Telegram. You can follow me, and I will recommend channels. I will share posts from other channels. There's Russian channels that are in Russian and also English. Just use Google Translator. It does a pretty good job of taking Russian and translating it into English. I don't know about some of the other languages. Richard Medhurst does a great job. Yes. Ben Norton does a great job. He's multipolarista. I interviewed him not too long ago. So please, and Patrick Lancaster, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link in the chat right now so people who are interested, and I'll add that in to the video description as well. And please be careful when you click on these links. There is horrible scenes that you won't forget if you see this. It's extremely violent, what Patrick is seeing and trying to communicate to the world, because there was a missile strike on downtown Donetsk. This is just like it's a city. There's no military there, and they shot this ballistic missile into the middle of this area with cluster munitions, and it just killed all of these innocent people. And I looked through all of the fake Western media propagandists crying about, oh, Russia supposedly did this in Kiev, they supposedly did that, and not a single mention about these missile attacks by Ukrainian forces on Donetsk. It's utterly appalling. Patrick is the one covering that. It's very grim, very gory. So please be prepared if you click on that. Yeah, there's people in the comments now talking about a lot of really great sources. George Galloway, Vanessa Beeley, the Duran. Yeah, these are all really great sources. And Vanessa Beeley has been very consistent. She was covering the entire Syrian conflict the entire time. One of the few people out there getting it right consistently over and over again, and attacked constantly by the Western media. So yes, keep an eye on these people. I'll try to add it. Maybe, Angela, next episode, maybe we'll just do that. We'll get ready. Let's get ready for like getting completely wiped out of Western social media, and let's talk about all the different places we can go. Maybe we'll do that. We'll do maybe part of it, an update on Ukraine, and then talk about alternative media, how people can find it, follow it, support it. Unless you got anything else to say, Angelo, no. Maybe we'll wrap it up. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Again, your support means everything, and if the only thing you can do to support is sharing the work and news tips and kind comments, that is greatly appreciated. I couldn't do it without that. So thank you very much. Thank you, Angelo, as always. You're indispensable. And until next time, bye for now.